Good morning, everyone. This is Rise and Thrive on USLA Radio. I'm HENU Josephine Tarrant, and today I have Nakai Northup from the Mashantucket Pequot Museum and the Mashantucket Pequot Peoples. And so come and welcome and say hello, everybody. So Nakai Northup works at the Mashantucket Pequot Museum and Research Center and lectures on Indigenous environmental activism, preservation of Native history as well. He's a member of the Mashantucket Pequot tribe, and he works at the Mashantucket Pequot Museum and Research Center in the Education Department. He's also the vice chairman of the Mashantucket Pequot tribe's Natural Resource Protection Committee, and his disciplinaries specifically are in historic preservation, environmental indigenous activism, food sovereignty, and teaching traditional Eastern woodland histories and lifeways. So it's really nice to meet you today, this morning. Thank you for being here with us. Yesterday I kind of was like, you're the first person who I'm talking to who I haven't met in person. So I was like, well, I have to go and add him on Instagram or something just to see if we know the same people. And so it was kind of good to know, like, okay, so we have some common peoples, and so we're able to kind of make some of those connections, I feel, and that feels good. Feels like we know each other now a little bit better.
Yes. Thank you.
Right. So how are you feeling this morning?
I feel blessed. It's rainy here in Mashantucket today with the storm coming through.
Is it?
But these days, I really get to refocus. Had a great event yesterday, so today's kind of a reload and just process and digest everything.
Right. A little bit of powwow hangover. Just a little.
Yeah.
For sure. So tell me a little bit about the event yesterday. I've been able to attend the event quite a few times in the past, and it's always like, it's a fun time because it's like, nice and chill. It's like in between all of the powwows in the middle of the week. So tell me a little bit about the event, obviously how it went, who was all there, and then kind of what it is, why you feel the event is so important, for your tribe and for the towns and the surrounding areas.
Absolutely. So this was a bit different than what we've done in past years, because, the typical excuse now is COVID. We've had to adapt and adjust, and having lesser staff this year and funding. So we did a downscaled version of the educational powwow, and it was more of a short lecture and then demonstrations of traditional song and dance and powwow style music as well.
Awesome.
We had 9 dancers, and we had a Eastern war dancer, Northern traditional. We had jingle, grass, fancy men and fancy shawl, and a Southern traditional dancer. So it all really worked out great. We had a great drum group. We had Wichazani singers.
Oh, okay.
We had my cousin Rashad Young playing the flute, and he's up and coming with that. He makes everything by hand himself, and he's taking the time to really, educate himself on the flute and different versions and different songs as well. The turnout, we had about 200 people, which for a Thursday, we're very happy about. And it's such an important event because we are holding our powwow this year. We're going to hold our Skimitzen August 28th and 29th, but this gives people kind of a fresher up, gets people prepped for that, and teaches them the protocols and teaches them what's appropriate at a powwow, because people can be ignorant to these subjects. People can be ignorant to our traditional ways of life and how we carry ourselves. So being able to educate the public appropriately in such an intimate setting, and it worked out great.
Yeah, that sounds great. You said something, and I was just like, I'm gonna ask. Oh yes, so the powwow is happening this year. Let's just plug in those dates, for the powwow that's happening on August 28th and August 29th this year. So very excited. I know a lot of people out here are pretty excited. I think it's like one of the few powwows that are happening this summer. kind of, what is it? Post-COVID.
Right.
Post-COVID summer is kind of a weird summer. There's a lot of powwows in between. And I'm pretty sure everybody on here on Rise and Thrive is pretty educated on, powwows and
Right.
what all of that is. I hope you all are. We could get into it another time, but we're gonna kind of keep moving here. So yes. So yeah, I think that's pretty interesting because I spent a lot of years, in and out of Connecticut. I think especially, with the Mashantucket Pequot tribe used to have Skimitzen, and there would be all of these continuous powwows weekend after weekend. So we spent a lot of time in the Connecticut, New England area when I was younger, and then into like my teenage years and stuff. But I think a lot about the surrounding towns that all of these places are in. And it's so interesting because there's these huge native populations, and then there's these towns who really don't seem to understand a lot about them or who they are or what they even do, right? And then you have to you're also reminding yourself this is New England, right? So there's a lot of I guess just lack of education a lot of the times, obviously through the school system, of course. And I think that definitely coincides with the importance of these type of events in these areas specifically, right? Because, the Pequots, Mashpees, Narragansetts, they've been here for Mohegans, they've been here for, time immemorial. And a lot of these towns, try to kind of, I mean, you probably know better than I do because I never lived in these towns, really try to ignore their existence, right?
Right.
So when you think about that, how does that kind of coincide, I think, with one of the disciplinaries that you do, which is historic prevention?
Yeah.
How do you kind of see those two coinciding? Because I think coming from New England, I think being from the East Coast in general, we come from a very specific point of view when it comes to colonization, because it happened so early on, right? So we have all of these years and years of trauma that have been built up from these historic events that were devastating for our communities that have happened. So how do you kind of see those links between historic prevention and I guess education in your area?
Absolutely. So here, like you're mentioning, a lot of these local towns like Mystic, Stonington, Waterford, Montville, these areas and they're settled directly after the Pequot War, right after the massacre. You see their signs saying settled in 1637, settled in 1636, and these are a lot of the people here still hold a very colonial mindset and feel very entitled to this land. Whereas, from an indigenous point of view, we're not owners of this land, we're stewards of this land. And I've kind of taken the approach now, and I've been given some pretty cool opportunities, but I'm in my local town that, I went through the local public school systems, and most of the tribal members go through the Ledyard school systems here. I just got word yesterday that I was nominated to run for the Board of Ed. So, I just got the call yesterday.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So having a Pequot presence and having an indigenous point of view is very important, because growing up as a kid, we didn't have that in the school systems. I mean, we would, of course, get the bus to ride back to the res, and then, we're with our aunties and uncles, and we're with our family, and we're learning. But in school, any indigenous subject comes up, and it's Western expansion, it's any tribe. The Indian kid is automatically the expert on this subject and to know all of this. And as we know, our tribes are unique, and we have our own beliefs and our own practices, and they vary. So that's something that's hard to deal with here. And then, like I mentioned, people are very entitled to the land here, and very entitled to their ways of life. So collaboration is something that I'm really trying to spark and bring up, and share our culture with them, and give appropriate teachings, and show that we can coexist, we can make this work, but we deserve a certain amount of respect.
Yeah, for sure. And then do you see, because I'm just I was looking, through some of the things that you've already talked about, and I'm just let's just talk about these connections, because I think, a lot of the disciplinaries that you specifically, talk about, or, I guess educate about, are all really linked to each other. And I think, of course, that's we always talk about Indigenous people having these ways of thinking, and it's these connections and all of these things, because for a lot of the times it is that for us. We see things in connection to each other. We don't see things as separate, right? So that kind of brings me into environmental activism. When you think about that, also within the New England area, right? I mean, I think, yeah, when you think about that in the New England area, like what does that really look like? What does that entail? Because we're already talking about the town and education, right? And the lack of education. So what does that feel like with environmental activism?
Absolutely. So the land is our greatest teacher. That's our first teacher. And if we take the time to sit and observe and nurture the land, it gives us lessons for a lifetime. So that's something that we've really tried to instill, and we were fortunate enough here. We have decent relationships with some of the federal agencies. Really, the main projects that are coming up around here environmentally are like wind turbines. So off the coast of Block Island, they put wind turbines, and they consulted with the tribes, which was nice of them. And they were going to put them on the southwestern side of the island. And we requested that they put the southeastern side, because any Indigenous person that would have been buried on that island, our protocols, our procedures are to face them towards the southwest. So we didn't want to interrupt anyone's journey, pathway, anything. So, I've also had opportunities to work with URI on different land impacts, and I got certified in ceremonial stone landscapes to be able to, help protect important sites. And today it's kind of hard, because as soon as it's almost better to know the site is there, and keep it to yourself and keep it to your people, than to put it on the National Register and put it on places where then it becomes public information and people are able to go and find it. But fortunate enough for us in this area, we have been having people consult with us prior, rather than just go for it. And we haven't had too many big projects as of late. We did travel out to Standing Rock. We had a number of people from our community travel out there. We had, I think, 3 different groups from Mashantucket travel out, all at different times. And I traveled out there in my mother-in-law's minivan. And we packed up our tribal youth council and the director of the museum at the time, and, drove the 34 hours out. And we went and fought for the water. And that's something that's important to us, especially as Pequot people, we're coastal people. So the water is something that is very important to us. And we actually don't really have any access to the water right now. The reservation is landlocked, and Pequot translates to people of the shallow water. We're a coastal people, and we really rely on that. So that's something that really struck home with us, because that's something we're fighting for now. And some partnerships that are on the come up for the nation are actually offering us some access to water, which is pretty promising.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that would be great, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think, I think we're getting ready to take a quick break. So before we even get into another subject, we'll take our break, and we'll be right back with you all. And yeah. Hello, welcome back. This is Rise and Thrive on USLA Radio, and this is HENU Josephine Tarrant. Today we are speaking with Nakai Northup from the Mashantucket Pequot tribe. So, right before our break, we were talking about environmental activism, and I think what I would like to talk about, leading into that, of course, is how that coincides with food sovereignty, which I think it very much does, right? And I think there's a lot of tribes who have the belief that our environmental preservation and activism directly coincides with our food sovereignty, right?
Mhm.
We think about the health issues that we have in Indian country, the health issues that we have in our individual communities or different tribes, reservations, whatever areas, heart disease, kidney disease, diabetes, the list could really go, lupus, the list could go on and on and on. And a lot of times that coincides with the type of foods that we consume, and during colonization, a lot of the times, we were given rations or whatever type of devastating predicaments we were in or our tribes were in. We were given these foods, right, by the government or, whoever, during the European invasion, basically. And a lot of it was food that is not traditionally what we would eat.
Right.
And it affects our, our bodies and, how we are able to function. Of course, like you've exercised, like, when we think about the types of foods we were eating pre-European invasion versus now, like when you think of hot Cheetos, ramen, these types of things that are really cheap, or flour or milk, these cheap things that are easy to buy, easy to cook. And then some of our generations have been brought up on it because it's all we've had access to, because of, pretty much our economic stature in this country, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it directly correlates, because without our proper environments, without fighting for this environment, then we won't be able to have access to the food that we should be eating, right? And so I think Nakai's going to talk a little bit about that, and what that means specifically for your community, how that correlates with each other. I mean, you're talking about the ocean. So it's like, I think that's one thing that directly correlates, because, I mean, back in the day, I'm sure you would have been eating lots of clams and, crabs and, you go ahead, you take it away.
No, absolutely. This is something I'm extremely passionate about.
Yeah.
In my free time, I love to cook. I also have like a cooking page on Instagram, and I put up paleo recipes. And that's something that I kind of converted to over quarantine when, stuck inside and having to cook every meal. And I changed my diet up. And last year I was 300 pounds, and I lost 70 pounds over the course of quarantine from going to a more traditional diet. Cutting carbs, taking out the flours, the processed sugars and processed foods, eating meat, veggies, fruits, using natural sweeteners like honey and traditional syrup that we tap right here on the reservation. And it has done wonders for me, not just physically, but mentally. It's really helped change my mindset, and it's helped my growth as a human being. And it's something that I encourage all tribal people to really try to get back into, eating seasonally with the foods that are in season. In Mashantucket right now, we have a 525-acre farm that, one of my cousins, Jeremy Whipple, is heading the project, and he's been, a great asset to the community. He's pushed and fought for this because there's nothing better than being able to feed your people. And we have 4 greenhouses there now, and growing lettuce, tomatoes. We're looking at the possibility of a vineyard there. And we're now developing an agricultural department. There's positions available for tribal members now in agriculture, which we'd never had before. Which is a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think when you think of food sovereignty, I think it's something, when I think of like our generation, I guess I was going to say, I kind of see it, and I don't see it as like a trend, because I don't think it's trendy. I think it's just something that people have just started to become more aware of in our generation. I think because a lot of us, have had family members who have had these complicated health issues that we watched really struggle with, right? And when you look back on like the things that we were consuming and eating, because we're in a rush, because we have a lot of things to do, because we don't have a lot of money or whatever the situation is, you realize like this is a lot of things that we normally wouldn't eat, right? And these are things that are overtly pretty much bad for us, right? And instead of like, let me do the Greek diet or all these different diets, these different fads, right? Like even people try to talk about like, paleo as a diet, but it's not really a diet. It's just a way of eating.
It's a lifestyle.
Yeah,
What I call it. I don't call it a diet. And you really have to. It's a commitment that you have to make. But that's another thing I've been working on as well, is a cookbook that'll hopefully be out in September. And indigenous style cuisine, but fusion style too, because my wife is from Mexico, and I love Mexican food, tacos, but love Asian food. So having venison, having snapping turtle, turkey, duck, but having them different styles but traditional foods. It's something I'm working on. And like you're mentioning, the foods that are easily accessible today, our bodies were never meant to process that. Dairy, most indigenous people are lactose intolerant. That's
right.
It's hard for our bodies to process. Flour, which of course we've adapted over time, and like now today, how fry bread is a big thing in Indian country and Indian tacos, but that's ration foods that we were given, and we were forced to adapt and make something that we could survive off of.
Yeah.
But that's because they killed all our bison. That's because they clear cut our forest here in Mashantucket and all the deer.
Right.
And they're polluting the waters and doing things like this. So that's just us adapting and making do with what we have. But I really encourage anyone to try to go for a traditional diet. I know it's in today's times it is expensive. You can go and get a burger for $1, but a salad's going to cost you.
Yeah.
And it's a lot, but it's well worth it for the mind, body, and the spirit.
Absolutely. And I think like it's such a vital and important thing to think about. And I think it's so funny, like, you're saying you started to cook a lot like over the quarantine. And I think a lot of people over the quarantine really were thinking about their health in a different way than they ever have, because you are cooking all of your own meals. You are in charge of what's going inside of your body. And it's making you kind of forcing you to think, not to mention the predicament we're in the world. It's making you think like, is this something, because I feel over the quarantine, my diet changed drastically, you know what I mean? And I started to intuitively eat. Like sometimes, I just want green things. I don't know why. So I just go and eat green things. I'm not going to question it. And, like even like my partner now, like he's like the worst eater. You know what I mean? He's from North Carolina. So it was like, oh my God, like he's just like fried everything, ranch on everything. And like this, like literally like a week ago, he's like, my stomach hurts so bad. I think I'm allergic to milk. Like, I think I knew I was allergic to the milk the whole time. And like, now he has to like search for all of these things right now, whatever he likes to eat. I know what healthy stuff I like, but he's got to find out what healthy stuff he likes, because it is vital for, right? Like, what is the point of like, we're doing all of this work for ourselves, for our communities, fighting for our communities, fighting for our environmental issues, fighting for, food, if we're not alive to reap the benefits of these things. And our health and what we eat is vital to our livelihood, to our community's livelihood.
Food is medicine.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Food is medicine, absolutely. So like that is our main source of medicine. Most of these starts in the gut. So what you're putting into your body is essential to your livelihood. And one thing I've noticed with changing my eating style is now after I eat, I have energy and I can keep going. Whereas before, if I'm eating like burgers or like fried foods, you get the itis after, and you want to get back and relax a bit.
Right. No, exactly. And so like it's just so important. It's such like a thing that I feel a lot of communities are talking about right now, but because it is so important, and like the more information more of our communities start to get, the better it is. Like, I think it's wonderful that you guys have a greenhouse and that you guys are growing your own food, because I think that's another thing through the pandemic people started to think about, was like, we need to be growing our own food. Like the grocery stores are like shutting down. They don't have cans and bread and milk. And it's like, is that what I'm going to eat for 2 weeks anyways? No.
Right.
Like I need apples. I need salad. I need something,
You
and
see
so
people today interested in it. You see people wanting to know where their food came from, looking for more organic foods, and like really pressing for that. So that's something it's getting more important for people.
Yeah, And that's wonderful because it could always, if anything happens, you could always provide food for the tribe. And if anything ever happens, like economically, you always have like a staple there. You know what I mean? Even if that's not what you wanted to use it for. But I think, going into, what was I going to say? I just had it on the tip of like my brain. Food sovereignty. Wow. I lost it. Well, anyways, we'll just keep trucking along here. What was I gonna say? It's like bothering me now because I'm like, it was right there. Oh my gosh, what was I gonna say? I was gonna talk about foods. Okay, well, I lost it. So we're just gonna keep moving like it's gone. I don't know where it went. But oh man, it was like really like my next subject. So like now I'm struggling. Like what are we gonna talk about now? So right. So yeah, food sovereignty. And then I think kind of just going into, I think maybe, what are some of your favorite meals? Like I love the idea of you fusing things together because I feel, not that I'm a cook, but I feel like, that's kind of the things I do. Like sometimes I see online recipes like that other like indigenous people maybe in other countries or people that are close to like other places that they're similar agriculture from like tribes that I'm from, and I'm like interested in the food. I'm like, because that looks like really good and it looks like fresh, and I'll try it, and it's just like it ends up actually like being really tasty. So what are like one of your favorite recipes you think when you're thinking of like stuff that you're cooking?
So I'm an avid hunter and fisherman.
Okay.
Yeah, so I hunt a lot on res, and I get about 5 deer a year.
Wow.
And my first one always goes to the community, and I make sure all the elders of the community have meat, and then the rest gets my family throughout the year. And then we fish a lot. I have 2 children, son who is going to be 2 next month, and a daughter who's going to be 6 tomorrow. And and getting them involved in it, so it's something that they see regularly. So I go out and hunt a deer, and I come back, and my daughter's watching the whole process from processing it to the table to when she's eating it and it's on her plate. So venison is by far one of my favorites. We eat a lot of venison. We do just about anything with it, from making like breakfast sausage out of it, empanadas. We smoke salmon. I love salmon, and
salmon's delicious.
Yeah, I eat a ton of seafood, especially more so in the summer. My diet in the summer is like 4 days out of the week I'm eating seafood. Clams, codfish, crabs, lobster, whatever I can get my hands on.
And then it doesn't like feel as decadent almost, right? Because you're like, I should be eating this.
Right. This is exactly what my people were eating at this time anyway. So this is normal.
Right. And you said it takes that like thing away, like, oh, seafood's so expensive. Like, why are you going to buy seafood? Like, I'm supposed to be eating this. So thank you. I'm actually eating properly. I'm actually being healthy.
And the waters are still abundant. We go out and, harvest our own quail hogs. We go and catch blue crab. So it is.
But venison too, you could do so much with venison.
Right.
There's like, I went and workshopped a piece up in Nipissing First Nations up in Canada, like Ontario, like a little bit northern Ontario. And they're like very, they hunt all the time out there, right? But they would do everything with wild game. And it was like the same that, you know what I mean? That we would have fajitas, we would have spaghetti. It was just like replacing beef or replacing the chicken or like poultry, whatever it is, with this wild game. And honestly, the meals were like delicious. You're like the healthy, like you felt so healthy, like after even though it was like filling,
Right. My wife was anemic for a long time. And I started, getting her into venison. She wouldn't eat it at first. She was like timid about hunting, and now she's like all about it. She's my partner in crime with it. But
that's dope.
I got her into eating venison, and her blood level's been fine ever since, her iron levels, and it's been great. It's my kids eat it regularly, and it's what I grew up on. This is just regular for me, and I've been fortunate enough to have cousins who, haven't been involved in hunting and fishing as much growing up, who are reaching out to me now when
Yes.
I'm able to get out in the woods and get them involved and, teach them to be able to one day feed their families, and, provide subsistence for themselves.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing to be able to do, honestly. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a city Indian, so I never grew up hunting. I've always wanted to, but people are like, you talk too much. But I mean, because everyone's like, you have to be quiet. And actually, I think I was up in Connecticut like 4 or 5 years ago, and I was like, can someone take me hunting? And everyone's like, no, we're not taking you hunting. But I wanted to go so bad because I was like, this is just something we all need to know how to do. If we all don't know how to do this, like, our children might not know how to do it, like, because it really is an essential part. And I guess that goes into food sovereignty as a whole of our livelihoods, because it's such a huge part of our traditions.
Absolutely.
It's such an important part of our traditions. And so many of like our ceremonial traditions, or whatever, song, dance, all are in relation to hunting.
Right.
So it's like all of it coincides when you think about the environmental activism into our food that we're consuming, into the traditions that we try to continue to cultivate and hold on to.
Right.
I think we're going to take another quick break and we'll be right back. Thank you. Hello, everybody. This is Rise and Thrive on USLA Radio with HENU, Josephine Tarrant, and Nakai Northup. And we are back from our short break. And so we were just kind of leaving off. We kind of went on a food sovereignty tangent, but it felt necessary because food sovereignty is just such an important thing for us to talk about. I think as Indigenous people, it's such a vital thing to our livelihood. And we could just, honestly, you could go on about that subject forever and ever. There's berries, there's roots, and then it goes into medicines, right? And I think that is pretty much the next step into it. So I think what we want to talk about, going from food sovereignty, are those histories and life ways of, the Pequot peoples and surrounding tribes in those areas, right? And what that I guess what that means when you are educating non-natives, right? And how important that is. As I said in the beginning of the episode, Nakai Northup is a member of the Mashantucket Pequot tribe and works at the Mashantucket Pequot Museum, which is a beautiful museum. And I encourage everybody to go there if you have the chance to. It's in New London.
It's right on the reservation in Mashantucket.
Oh, so it's on the reservation in Mashantucket, and it is a gorgeous museum. It has like these big windows, but I think even outside of like the beauty of it, and I think it even has like, what do they have, like a hang glide or something, or what are those things
We
called?
have a zip line that comes from the casino over to the bottom of the museum now. Yeah.
Now that is wild. I have to check that out. Like, I need to see what that is about. But I mean, it's just surrounded by this beautifully wooded area, because it's on the res. But the museum itself is the really interesting part of the Mashantucket Museum. I've always thought since I was younger. We used to go there a lot. It was always fun to go to the museum because it just had all of this information, and they have these what are they? They're like, I guess, wax figures, kind of, to represent different life ways of like the Pequots back, pre-European invasion. And it is just really something you have to walk through. It's so much fun. Like, there's all of these people. Like, it really illustrates what life was like pre-European invasion in that area, and they even had like a little movie theater. I don't know if they still play that movie. That movie scarred me for life when who was it? What actor was it? Was it Wes Studi? And he kills the Indian. He chops off his head and he brings it to like these the settlers on the boat.
Yeah.
Horrifying. Scarred me for life, like for real. But it's very educational, and it's a lot of great information in there, and it talks about agriculture and all types of stuff. So if we could, maybe highlight a little bit on that and what that is like, teaching some of those things, or what are some of the things that you teach specifically out of the museum when it comes to those histories?
Absolutely. So the museum is my favorite place in the world. I've been here going on 10 years now. And of course, growing up as a kid, coming here all the time.
Mhm.
And, this is the largest Native American museum in the world. The
Is it?
building is 304,000 square feet. We have 85,000 square feet of exhibit space. The village, which represents a Pequot village in the 1550s, is a half acre of exhibit space, and you're fully immersed with life casts of real people that they took molds of. And, we
Yeah.
had real tattoo artists come in and do their tattoos, and uh, you really feel immersed in it, and you
Yes.
feel part of it. And the contributions that we had, not just from the Pequot tribe, but from local tribes as well, our sister tribes, have really
Mhm.
made this museum an excellent place. And we love it because, we get to tell our story from our point of view, from our perspective.
Yes.
That's not often how we see history portrayed today. Um, so I get people who come in this building and they, learned all this throughout their education, and they're in college now, and they come to the museum and they're like, well, everything I learned was a lie.
Yeah.
And now I'm getting the truth. Why didn't they teach us this in school? Why aren't we learning this? And that's something that I really take pride in, because once we get people in this building and they come to the exhibits, we have them forever.
Yeah.
And they always love the space. So I really take pride in teaching traditional lifeways, teaching how the people coexisted with the land, and how we were stewards of the land, and how um, the gifts that the land offered us and the waters offered us. And depending on the group, really depends on the program. I'm really open to customizing programs for people, because when people come here and they make the trip here, I want them to get the most out of their visit. So that's something I'm really open to, is what are you interested in when you come here? What are you want to focus on? Because we have our set tours that we go through while we're here in programs, but there's so many programs you can do here. There's so much. Like, I have certain sections of the museum where you're typically on a tour, you go and breeze by and talk about for 5 minutes, that I've done an hour program there. And I really take pride in how my people lived on this land, and how my people have been here, how my people were born to this land.
Yeah.
And that's what I take pride in teaching to others, and showing our traditional way of life, and then even talking about how we're still here today, how
Mhm.
it's not just in the 1550s living that way. We found a way to survive and maintain, and we're a thriving people today. We're a growing people today.
Right.
And that's a point that I always love to get across to people, because society always tries to make us seem like we're from the past, or we're unicorns, we're mythical creatures
Mhm.
around.
Mhm.
That's not the case, as we know.
Yeah.
So that's something that I fight and try to advocate for a lot, is showing that, yeah, we're in touch with our traditions and our past, but we're a modern people too, and we're thriving in today's society, and we're making our presence known in today's society, in today's America as well.
Yeah. And I think when we think about, who our people are today, I think one thing I'm thinking of is, so I'm one of the producers for the Reflections Native Voices Festival, which is an organization I work for. And recently we had the pleasure, we did a music night, and we got to have Primo a part of that. And so he's also Pequot, and he's he's a part of the tribe. And it was great because I remember like directing, whatever, getting all of these performances together and going through them with my friend who's from up in Minneapolis. And we were going through it, and we were just like, right, like, this is kind of like, I could really listen to this. Like, we could really put this on in the car. And it was like, I just think the realization that like we really are allowed to be whoever we want to be.
Right.
Like, he wants to rap about what he wants to rap about. He doesn't have to rap about being Native. He doesn't. I mean, if that's what he wants to include, of course, include whatever you want to include. But it's like, I think just the freedom, it was like, kind of liberating to just see that.
Right.
I feel like River was the person who put me in touch with all of this stuff. But, it was kind of relieving to see that, because so often we're not even allowed to just artistically express ourselves.
Expression of self, and that's right.
Exactly.
You have to be categorized in a specific way.
Right.
But no, as a people, we're versatile.
Yes, and I think we're all, and especially because we're coming from these very unique experiences all across the board. You know what I mean? A rapper from Detroit is going to sound different than a rapper who is, you know what I mean, from Mashantucket Pequot, or from New London, or wherever. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I think that is just such an important thing to touch on, because we are evolving, we are growing, we are, we're all coming from these unique experiences, and we're continuing to come from these unique experiences. And so I think those mentalities of like, encouraging for us to be who we want to be, however we want to be, is really what we need. We don't need people like we're just trying to get it out. Like, please just let us, just be as weird, as interesting, as whatever as we want to be, because as soon as we start to categorize those things of what we should be, you work at the museum. If people want that education, go to the museum, please. Like, you know what I mean? That is what's going to give you that education, but you cannot expect that, right, out of everybody who is discovering, different things about themselves, right? I mean, I think me and you know that, right? But it's just to reiterate that to our audience today, because I think it's something to remember when you're talking to Native peoples. We're not all coming from the same experiences. We're not all the same people, and we're not all of us are educated in all of these histories. You know what I mean? Today we're very lucky because we're talking to somebody who really knows about these histories and these life ways, right? But I think it always differs, and I just want people to always continue to have that open mind. So you were talking about the museum. So what is your favorite part of the museum, you think?
So this is my problem when I go through on a tour. I always say to people, "Oh, this is my favorite part. Oh, this is one of my favorite parts," and I end up saying it through the entire museum.
Right.
But you really just can't beat the village space.
That's yeah.
It's just one of a kind, and just the storylines that are going on, and the fact that we're not trying to depict anything special in there. Like, there's no big event going on. It's just showing you everyday life. It's just, if you took a time machine to 1550 and strolled through Pequot Village, that's what would be going on.
Yeah.
And, like I mentioned, we're a coastal people, so you see people fishing in there. You see just people socializing, having conversation with one another. And, life was so simple. Everyone had their jobs, everyone had their tasks they were to complete, but we've over time just made life more difficult than it needed to be. They really had it down, and had a great way of living. And at that time, we were a thriving people. We've really discovered how to live off the land. We really, we were heavy into horticulture at the time, which allowed our populations to really boom and grow. And then, contact came, and different struggles and different adversities. But as Indigenous people, we've thrived and we've overcome. And that's something that, I love to tell people that, even though we went through, all these genocides and atrocities, and we're still fighting today. We're still proud and we're still here. And that's something we're never going to let you forget. And that's by far, I love the Life on the Res portion too, which is after the village and after the Pequot War, talking about, the formation of the reservation. Reservation system started right here in Connecticut. The oldest reservation is Golden Hill Pagustet's, but my reservation right here is the oldest continuously occupied reservation in North America.
Wow.
We've been on this piece of land since 1666.
Oh, wow. I did not know that.
And this isn't even our first reservation. This is just the one that we've been on the longest.
Right. Okay. Really, before we take our break quickly, I also kind of want to get into it, because so the Pequots, when they're traditional lands, what exactly did that consist of? Because I know Connecticut, obviously, just because I know people who are in Connecticut. But then the more I go to Massachusetts, or the more I go into some of these more northern states, they're like, oh, so and so and so in the Pequots. And I'm like, really? I didn't know they were all the way up here. So I would love to know more about, like, what was their actual territories? Because it was more than the area that you guys are in then.
Yeah, so we're in a very small portion of our area. This was kind of the hub for us, but we had territories in Rhode Island. we had territories in Long Island where we had very close relationships with the Montauk and the Shinnecock.
Right.
And one of our like most well-known sachems at the time, Sassacus, they say had Mohawk descent, so up into New York as well.
Yeah.
So we were pretty widespread. They estimate about a 250 square mile radius from where we are right now. So a pretty big portion of land. And then, Connecticut has 5 other tribes today, but there were other smaller river tribes like the Tungus, the Quinnipiacs, and different tribes that, don't have their land base and a full population today.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting to hear, because the more I hear, I'm like, where? So they had multiple territories. That's very interesting to hear, because I've never actually gotten like a full breakdown of that. I mean, besides, going through the museum and stuff when I was younger, but I was like, when he's talking about, the life size, or what is it called when you
life cast,
the life cast, that is like, that will blow you away if anyone ever goes, because it's like, it still looks like pretty high tech. I feel like it's, the water looks real, everything looks so real that you're just like so engulfed in that, but yeah, that's really interesting to hear, because there are all these relationships with all of those tribes in the surrounding areas that the Pequots definitely have, right? And those are built from familial relationships that go back generations. I mean, much like that's how a lot of tribes are in the United States. For those who don't know, you know what I mean? It's, a lot of times we intermarried with each other so often that we would almost start to merge into each other, right? And you can even kind of
in there against it.
Yeah,
so
are you okay?
Yeah, that's most most tribal people around here are, multiple of these nations.
Yeah, exactly, right. And I was just about to say, we still see it today. Like a lot of us still continue to marry into these tribes that are close to our tribe. It just kind of ends up like that, you know what I mean? People, that's how it is. But it also historically, it kind of coincides when people talk about what is it, enrollment, or whatever, when the government decided to try to have us categorize ourselves. That's a lot of times what made it so complicated, is because so many of us were married into other tribes or were half of another tribe, and we didn't consider that. So it kind of really messed up, like, basically what we claimed for ourselves, because we had this kind of paper census that was trying to take a census of who we are, when we in fact are multiple things in the areas a lot of the times.
Absolutely.
Like I'm Rappahannock from Virginia, but like I know my grandmother was also part Delaware. I don't say I'm Delaware because I don't have much Delaware in me, but that's what Delawares and Rappahannocks did. They intermarried, and so there's those histories that happen along these coasts that when you try to put a paper census on it, kind of complicated a lot of our familial, I guess, lines,
Definitely.
So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. This is Rise and Thrive on USLA Radio. So welcome back, everybody. This is Rise and Thrive on USLA Radio. My name is HENU Josephine Tarrant, and today our guest is Nakai Northup. So we just kind of logged off before this break, really just talking about intermarriage and how all of that kind of, affects us, and how, I guess what it really shows is just how much we are all really a part of each other. When people say like quotes like all my relations and stuff, like people might think it sounds corny, but it really is a real thing, because that's right. That is how we function in our communities, is off of our relationships with each other. So I think it kind of complicates it when people try to understand us, because a lot of times we have brothers who we're not related to by blood, or don't have the same mother and father or whatever, and are from a different tribe. And people are like, but how does that all work? And that's just how we work.
Absolutely. And I always feel so at home when I travel to other people's reservations, and I always feel so welcome, And
Yeah.
that's something I notice every res I go to. Um, you get brought in your family. They're filling your belly. They're making sure, if you need a place to crash, you're good to go. And that hospitality that you see throughout Indian country, you know, it's something I love and I cherish. Growing up as a kid on the res, there'd be a pack of kids riding on bikes, and you'd see bikes in the front yard, and you just walk right in the house. You don't knock or anything,
Mhm.
and your auntie or uncle's going to make sure you have a snack in the cupboard, and you're good to go. And that closeness, that connection is amazing. And I love traveling to different reses and spending time with the people and learning their life ways and learning, seeing what's similar, what's different, um,
Yeah.
and honoring that and
Mhm.
showing an appreciation for that. And I love when people come and visit here and being able to be a host for them and
Yeah.
provide hospitality for them as well.
And I think that's almost like a part of us, and like, I guess, kind of I don't know, I'm not going to use it, but I guess like in an instinctual way
Yeah.
is when we travel and we get to know other people, and like when you think about that and you think about our ancestors or our families or our elders, they've been doing that for generations, and our generations before that have done that. And so it's like it's so built into us to meet other native people, to meet surrounding tribes, and to get to know them. And like, because if you are a person like, I'm not from any tribes in New York or New Jersey. I'm from different tribes outside, right?
Yeah.
But I live here. So it's like I have to have respect for the people who are here. So I have a lot of relationships with a lot of Shinnecock.
Right.
Well,
Good.
you know what I mean? I have a lot of relationships with people up your way, or I have a lot of relationships with a lot of Lenapes in New Jersey, because I
Right.
have to have those. It's such an important part of
Mhm.
being a native person. I think in this country is like, you get to know the surroundings people, because at the end of the day, those people are from there, right? So if anything ever happens to you, these people are going to be the people to most likely support you,
Right.
because they have a home base and they have that space for you, and you become family with these people, like really family. Like, my great grandmother has been friends with some Shinnecock families since like the early 1900s, late
Yeah.
1800s, when she came from Virginia. And I still have those relationships. Now I'm related to them by
Okay.
blood,
Right.
right? Because, of course, I had an uncle who married them.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? That's how these things, and like when I think about these intermarriages and how we operate as people, it's like
Mhm.
when you look at our lives now, it's like, well, duh. Look at us now. Like, we're all like intermarried. We're all like in each other's families, basically.
Right. Right.
So, of
Absolutely.
course, back in the day, it was probably even more
Even
so,
more so, absolutely. And it's
you
been
know?
something we've been doing for centuries. I mean, if you look here, my people were whalers in the 1800s, and whaling was a job that indigenous people were able to get
Mhm.
fairly easily because we knew the waters,
Yep.
um, we knew the ways of life. We've been whaling long before it became an economy,
Yep.
and um, indigenous people would get on these ships, and we're going to go and bunk and be with who we relate with, who we can, and that really helped form relationships. And then when they clear cut our reservations, and it was hard to find work here, a lot of my people went to local cities and towns like Norwich and Westerly.
Yeah.
And there were whole, like, there's the Italian communities in these towns, but there were indigenous communities in these towns with Narragansett, Pequot, Shinnecock, Wampanoag families,
Mhm.
living all on the same street.
Yep. Yep. And having to create those communities
Right.
when we were separated from things, because
Mhm.
we didn't choose to be separated from where our ancestral homelands were. We didn't choose to be separated from that. We were most likely violently, or separated from our lands. So
Right.
when we were out here in the world, and a lot of times if we went to the cities for jobs or for money, we had to make those connections with other native people, because that was also what was going to keep us safe, and that was also what was going to keep us alive when we're talking about livelihood, right? And I
Mhm.
think all of these things, when we talked about all of these specialties and disciplines that Nakai specializes in, all of it has to do with the livelihood of all of native peoples, specifically your people, but all native peoples, whoever your peoples decide to have children with. It all has to do with our livelihood. I think at one point our ancestors really had to operate out of survival, and now we're in this place where some of us still do. You can't say, like, what I mean, it doesn't exist. It exists, but we are in this place where we can try to I think to start to support thriving. You know what I mean? Us being able to do what we want to do, right? And I think, what are some of the things you think of when you think of what it is you hope to see for the future? I think of your community.
Right. I am really, really working hard to make it so they don't have to fight so hard.
Mm-hmm.
So the next generations don't have to search so hard and fight so hard to feel accepted.
Yes.
I feel like all of us as Indigenous people at a point in life go through somewhat of an identity crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And, laying down the groundwork so that our children and our children's children have it easier than us. And that's my main goal in this life. My focus is education, and traditional knowledge and, culture and history, but just in general, making the road easier for these next generations, because just like our elders and our ancestors have done for us before, each generation, it tends to get a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
There's different problems that we deal with now, and different struggles, but it's getting better. We can speak our language if we want now. Our ancestors would be hung if they did. We can choose where we want to be educated. We're not being forced to go to places. So the fight is still ongoing, but we must appreciate the progress that has happened over time as well. And that's my goal, to just leave Mashantucket, leave Turtle Island better for the next generations, and more accessible and easier to live.
For sure. And then before we close out, I know we're like already running past time a little bit, but before we close out, I like to try to do this with a lot of the hosts, because I just think in the scope of things and coming out of that conversation, it is so important to remember how our joy is what pushes us forward, and how important our joy is, and how important it is for our children to have joy, for young adults too, for artists, for historians, for all of us to have these joys, because it is an act of resistance in a sense. And I think, you know what I mean? And because for so long, we're in this society that is not necessarily built for us to have joy. It's built for us to work. It's built for us to, economically sustain this country. But what is our joy as Native people? Because that is what keeps us going, the next generation going, and our livelihoods, which is what we've been talking about. A lot of this is our livelihood. So before we close out, Nakai, what would you say is, I won't make it in one word, but maybe let's do one word. How would you describe your joy in one word?
Family.
Yes.
You can't beat family, and family isn't just blood. You can choose family. You can choose who's an important part of your life. So family is something that's crucial to me, and that's what I hang my hat on, and that's what I pride myself around, is family, because all this work is for family. And like we mentioned before, that's not just like Pequot, that's not just my community, that's everyone. And that's something I try to pride myself on.
Yes, I love that. Well, it was really nice talking to you today, Nakai. I feel like we're going to see each other soon. I might come out to Pequot for the powwow. I have to see what's going on in this household. But,
I'm arena directing this year, so come on.
Are you what?
I'm arena directing this year. So.
Are you really? Okay, so then I'll probably, if I go, I'll definitely see you for sure then. I'll come and say hi to you. And if I don't see you then, we'll see each other again, I'm sure, because we'll always be around each other while we're out here. But it was really nice talking to you today. It was really great talking to you. Thank you so much for, giving us all of these gems to think about and mull about. I definitely feel for people who are living in the New England area. This is so much for you to think about and, consume, and, listening back on this, and then, take a visit to the Pequot Museum for sure. Take a visit, because it's so educational about the area that you live in. And I think, people out here, we all have to be responsible for that and responsible for our carbon footprint and also how we move forward, you know. But thank you very much. You all have a great morning, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Take care. Have a good one.
Have a good one.